I have Lesley, our resident homeschooling scientist mum, joining me here again today. This is the follow-up to that first video we did titled Science in the Homeschool. So if you haven't yet seen that, you might want to jump across and check that one out, and I'll leave a link down below. But in today's video, we're going to cover a few different topics around science in the homeschool. We will be covering things like a fair test, the scientific method, logical fallacies, and I also believe that we're actually going to be doing a few simple hands-on activities to demonstrate some of that. So let's jump straight into it, because I know the last one was really long. We'll try and keep this one a bit shorter. And we're going to be looking at what is a fair test.
Okay, a fair test. Okay, so very important, and after talking about this, I'll then explain how just in practical everyday life for adults this is important.
Yep.
Okay, so one experiment that I get my students to do when they're sort of around year 8 level is this experiment here. Okay, so it's looking at the effects on sugar, the amount of sugar on yeast activity. So here's the basic setup, which we'll put a bit closer so you can see what's there. Okay, so what we have here in this first bottle on the left, we have some yeast, we have some water at a certain temperature, and then as you go across the bottles, we have yeast and water at a certain temperature, but we also have sugar in the bottles. And then we measure the yeast activity by measuring the diameter of the balloons at a certain time.
Okay.
To see how much carbon dioxide is being produced.
Right, okay.
Okay, so let's come across the first important things that we need to know about this. Okay, so in this experiment we have what we call the independent variable.
Yeah.
It's the thing that we're changing in each bottle.
Yes.
So what is it in this experiment?
So this one we're changing sugar.
Yes, that's right.
Yep.
We're changing the sugar.
Yep.
And what we're doing is we're measuring a dependent variable. Okay, so we're measuring something. What are we measuring?
So we're measuring how much carbon dioxide is.
Yep. We're measuring the diameter of the balloon, which is an indication of how much carbon dioxide is being produced.
Yep.
So it's an indicator of how well the yeast is working.
Yes.
Okay, so if the aim of this experiment is to find out how sugar affects the activity of yeast, there's some important things that we need to do to keep it a fair test.
Yep.
Okay, the first one is we need to have this control here. Okay, the control is something that has no sugar in it at all.
Right, so it has done nothing.
And you can see, nothing's happened.
Right.
Okay. The second thing we need to do is all we're doing is we're changing the amount of sugar. So we need to keep everything else the same.
Right.
Okay, so what are the things that we need to keep the same in each bottle?
So we've got yeast and water.
Yep, so we need to keep the amount of yeast
Yes.
the same.
Yep.
We need to keep the water amount the same. Something else, there are a couple of other things we need to keep the same.
How much air?
Well, that will be the same because we're using the same bottles.
Oh, so that's going to be our next one. The size of the bottle needs to be consistent, so we need to make sure we're using all the same size bottles.
Same size bottles.
Yep.
We also need to keep the temperature of the water the same.
And that's often going to be the difficult part with all of these, because we've got different bottles. It's going to take time to fill each bottle. So the water temperature is going to change each time.
That's right. So for this particular experiment, we actually staggered the times on the bottles.
Right. Okay.
Because obviously we can't measure the diameters all at the same time.
Yes.
We can't add the water all at the same time.
Yep.
So we staggered the times so that we could do it consistent.
Yep.
That's where good record keeping is important.
Yes, okay.
Okay. And because we staggered the times, that gave us time in between starting off the next bottle to check the temperature of the water with the thermometer and adjust it with a little bit of boiling water or whatever was necessary. Okay,
Yeah.
So we have to keep those things the same. That's doing a fair test, controlling all those variables.
Yep.
Okay, the temperature of the water, the amount of yeast, the type of bottle used, also even the type of balloon used. Okay, so balloons, they might have a little bit of different stretchability.
Yes.
So we stretched them out both. Each balloon was stretched out twice.
Understand, okay.
To make sure that it could then expand.
Yeah.
Now, we also, let's talk about errors in the experiment. What errors could there be? things that might affect our results. Think about the balloons, okay?
Yep.
Although the balloons came from the same packet, it could
I was
be
just
that...
thinking, because even when you said that about balloons, I'm thinking, well, there could be slight imperfections
Yes.
in one particular balloon. There could have
Yeah.
been a slight imperfection in a plastic bottle.
That's right.
Yes.
Different elasticity.
Yes.
It could be, you know, with measuring the amount of sugar on, you know, particular home scales we've got, that, you know, it's not as accurate
Yes.
as it could be.
Yes.
Those sorts of things, okay, can affect.
Yeah.
It could be that the temperature of the room changed dramatically
Yes.
in the 30 minutes or 40 minutes that we did the experiment, so that the one that was started first could have had a higher temperature, outside room temperature.
Yes.
But by the end, the external temperature was different, and because these were started at a later time, that could affect it.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, when we do what we call like an in vitro test, or test tube, that's, you know, basically what it means.
So that's like in a petri dish or a test tube, or
a test tube, or in this case the bottle.
Yeah.
We can generally control those variables to keep it a fair test.
Yeah.
Okay. So something important that we need to recognise is that when we do an in vivo test, okay, so in a, you know, say human or a dog or a cat or whatever.
Yeah.
It's much harder to control those variables.
Yes.
To keep it a fair test.
So everyone's different.
But that's something that people need to be aware of
Yes.
in their understanding of science.
Yeah.
Okay, so for example, if you're looking at two groups of people and you're wanting to test the effect of a particular drug on, say, people with type 2 diabetes,
Yes.
and you want to see whether this drug will, you know, be a better drug than something else. Okay, so your control group takes the drug that, you know, is generally used, and then the experimental group are taking this different drug.
Right.
Okay, to keep it a fair test, you need to do things like age match your groups. Okay, if this group are all people over the age of 70 and this group are all people under the age of 50, then that's not controlling your variables very well.
Yes. Yes, you're manipulating.
You're manipulating.
Yes.
Okay, this group here might have a different ethnic background, for example.
Yes.
You know, they might have an Asian background, or, you know, they might be European, they might be African.
Yeah.
They might be Indigenous Australian.
Yes.
Those things can have an effect.
Right.
Okay, because there are genetic differences.
Yes.
Which can, you know.
So I guess this makes sense, and why we need to have the biggest sample group that we possibly can get.
That's important.
Because if we're only doing testing of diabetic drugs on 20 people,
that's right.
We can't count that as any type of
that's right.
result, really, at
sample
all.
size is important,
Yes.
and that's actually studied in statistical mass
Right.
that I mentioned in the earlier video.
Yes.
Okay, so you might say, well, why do I need to know this, or why would I get my, you know, students to study this?
Yeah.
I mean, in real life, they're not going to be bakers, you know.
Yes.
But it could be that they do end up being a baker, and then issues like how much sugar they put in their bread mix is really important.
Yeah.
But let's look at more, you know, an example that most people would come across. Okay, you're cooking dinner one night.
Yep.
Okay, you're frying sausages in an electric fry pan or something, and suddenly the electric fry pan turns off, and, you know, electricity's off.
Yes.
Okay. What sort of questions will you ask?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the first thing, if I'm in the kitchen, the first thing I want to do is see if my fridge is still running or if there's another appliance that's still working.
Excellent.
That will be the first thing I would do.
Yeah. Excellent.
Okay, it's not. Have I blown a switch in our house? That's our house. It has happened a few times. So I'd go check the switch box.
Yep.
If that's all okay, turn on some lights, figure out whether it's actually is it just our house? I might send one of the kids out, go and look and see if next door's lights are on.
Okay, so in this particular scenario, the lights are on.
Yes.
But your appliances aren't working.
Right,
So
okay.
it's a reasonable fair bet that your safety switch is tripped.
Yes.
So you go outside
Yes.
and you check your safety switch.
Yes.
Okay, and you notice your safety switch is off.
Yes.
It's been triggered. Okay, so, we come back inside. Now what we need to do now is we need to do a fair test to work out what has triggered that safety switch.
Yes.
So,
Was it the fry pan or was it actually something else?
could it be the fry pan? Could it be the kettle? Could it be the fridge?
Yes.
In my case, I've had two separate instances. One time it was the electric fry pan, one time it was the fridge.
Right.
In 40-degree weather.
Nice.
Needed a fridge in a hurry.
Yes.
Okay, so what they recommend you do is you turn off every appliance that's plugged into a power point.
Right. and go around and switch them all on.
Okay, and then to do a fair test, you turn them on one by one.
Yep.
To see which one triggers the safety switch. But what do you need to do before you do that?
I'm going to say something about safety here.
No.
Oh.
How are you going to know which appliance it is?
Well, you need someone out at the safety switch checking.
Okay, that's one way you could do it. Okay, so obviously once you've turned it all off, you go out, you turn your safety switch on.
Yes.
But an easier way than having someone out there and having to get them on the mobile
Yes,
phone
walkie-talkie.
would be to get a light that wasn't on when the safety switch was tripped,
Yes.
plug it in and turn it on.
Right, I can't have that near you. Yep.
And that would indicate,
Yes.
as soon as you've put something in and turned it on,
Yes.
which one it is
Yes.
causing it.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that's running a fair test.
Yep.
That's changing one thing at a time. You're turning one appliance on at a time.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a fair test. So that's why that concept is really important in a practical everyday life. It's also something that people need to know when they're, perhaps trying to understand scientific papers, and they can look at it and say, well, hold on a minute, that's not really a fair test.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on and have a look at the scientific method. I know in the first video you brought up the importance of that. So let's go through the scientific method and the components that make up the scientific method.
Okay, so the scientific method, very, very important. Okay, there's the sheet there. Okay, let's just work through it. Okay, so the first part of the scientific method is where we make observations in order to try to understand the world around us. And we start asking questions. So I'm going to give an example here. Pretend we don't know anything about gravity.
Right.
Okay, so we might observe, for example, that if we drop something, apples fallen off a tree,
Yep.
okay, and hit someone on the head or whatever, and we say to ourselves, well, why is it that the pencil drops when I drop it? Okay, why is it that when the apple falls off the tree, it falls and lands on the ground, or on someone's head?
Yes.
Okay, so we make observations and then we start asking questions. Okay, that leads us to our next point, is hypothesis.
Yep.
Okay, so we start to make a statement to think about, well, why that might be so. So, for example, we might say, well, everything falls to the ground, so the earth, might have this invisible force that we can't see that pulls everything down to the ground.
Yes.
Okay, so then once we do that, we then go into experimentation. Okay, we conduct our experiments using a fair test. We publish our results. We have a look at the outcomes. Now, with a hypothesis, it could be that the outcome of our test is to say, look, that evidence supports that hypothesis. It could be that the outcome of our experiments says, well, no, that's disproving that hypothesis. It could be that our outcome is that, well, yeah, it supports the hypothesis, but we sort of really need a bit more information. Okay, so now we know from history that obviously the idea of gravity moved from hypothesis to theory.
Yes.
With lots of evidence, and then that moved into law. We have the law of gravity.
Yes.
Now, along the way with doing experiments, one scientist does them, other scientists come in and they try to replicate those experiments. Okay, if you've written everything down, they come in and they do that. They might do more tests, and when they came back, say, yeah, well, we found exactly the same thing. Everything we've dropped falls to the ground.
Yep.
Okay, that gives you more and more support.
Right.
Okay, it then moves on to theory, then becomes law.
Yes.
Okay, but let's look at refining the hypothesis. Okay, so what happens when it doesn't fit your hypothesis? So, for example, someone could drop a feather and a book and say, oh, okay, the book landed first, and the feather landed later.
Yeah.
So the thing with more mass, there's more force acting on it and it lands first. Whereas the feather has less mass, therefore it doesn't act. So they could come up with a hypothesis, okay, things that have more mass will fall to the ground quicker.
Yes.
Okay, so this is where you'll publish your little result, you'll come up with this hypothesis. Someone else will say, okay, I'll do my experiment and they'll get a coin which weighs, 10 grams or something, and they'll get a book and they drop them. What happens? Can you tell me what will happen?
They fall at the same time.
Yep, they landed at exactly the same time.
Yes.
Okay, so this person's saying, well, your hypothesis really doesn't fit the evidence here.
Yes.
We've actually disproven your hypothesis by what
So you need to rework your hypothesis.
So something needs to be adjusted there.
Yes.
Okay. Now this is important. This is peers doing the same experiments, peers reviewing your experiments.
Yes.
Now, as it turns out, from doing more experiments, we know that the reason the feather doesn't fall to the ground as quickly as the book does is because of air resistance.
Yes.
Okay, so air resistance is what's responsible for keeping that feather dropping at the same time.
Yep.
And if you go into YouTube and actually just put in the keyword feather bowling ball vacuum, there's a video up there where it's the biggest vacuum in the world or something.
Right.
Where they have a camera and they drop a feather and a bowling ball and they land at exactly the same time.
Yes, I think I've seen that.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
So then you're refining your knowledge about gravity. So in one case we've got something disproving a hypothesis, and in another case what we're doing is finding more evidence to support our hypothesis.
Right.
And refining the hypothesis.
Yes.
What we don't do in science is prove things.
Right.
Okay, we don't prove things.
We just
in
find
science.
more evidence.
We just find more evidence, and as we get more evidence, that then shores up our understanding, our knowledge.
I guess, which is why we need to be careful in what we're putting out in the world when we are doing scientific experiments, because we need more proof. Well, not proof, that's the wrong word, I said the wrong
Evidence.
thing. We need more evidence. So we need other peers replicating our results.
Yes.
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 Okay.
Yes. And when you get obviously lots and lots of evidence, then it moves forward to theory and law.
Right. Yes.
In something like say medicine, when we're using particular drugs, obviously the more data we get, the more fair tests we do,
yes.
The more scientists involved, obviously we get to the point where we can say, okay, we're confident that this particular drug is safe, or whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So this whole idea of proof, it doesn't come into it. It's providing evidence base.
Right.
Okay, or disproving something.
Yes.
Now, something that's very important in the scientific method is evidence base for everything we do.
Yep.
Evidence base. So I read a comment on social media just recently where someone said that they follow the evidence and their gut instincts.
Yes.
And my comment was, well, that's a complete contradiction, okay? Because science, the facts in science really don't care about your gut instincts.
No, they don't care about what I think.
No,
Yep.
they don't, okay? People are flawed, and this is where we probably should talk about this idea of bias.
Right.
Okay, so the idea of the scientific method is we should keep it as objective as possible.
Yeah.
Okay, subjective means we bring all our bias into it.
Very difficult when you're a human.
Yes, it's very, very difficult.
Yes.
And I think if anyone says, oh, I'm completely objective, they're lying.
Yes.
Okay, because we all have, based on different backgrounds, some level of bias.
Yes.
But ideally, by using the scientific method, by making sure that other scientists can replicate what we do, and having lots of other scientists get more and more evidence to something, hopefully that bias doesn't become such a huge part of it. Okay, so where in this scientific method would there be a place for your political beliefs?
Well, there isn't one.
No, there isn't. Okay, I mention that because society today, I've noticed, are becoming very polarised according to their political beliefs about certain aspects of science.
Right.
And
yes.
it's one of those things where I feel like saying, put your political beliefs aside.
Yes.
Look at the science objectively.
Yes.
Okay?
But I guess for me, this is where I've come to the realisation for my children, because this is the whole point of this, is that I clearly haven't had a good enough science education. and so it's difficult to then make sure I pass that on to my kids. So it's understanding the importance of having that good background so that we can ensure that we are not allowing our bias and our political stance or any of those things to come into play with that.
Or your mummy instincts or...
or I just doesn't feel right. So I'm not going with that.
Okay. So again, let's see how this sort of idea is important in real life.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do electricity again.
Okay.
Okay, I was cooking dinner one night some years ago. Well, actually I wasn't really. It was in the slow cooker. It was doing it for me.
Yeah.
And suddenly the electricity went off. Okay, so I made an observation. The electricity's gone off. Okay, so I asked myself the question, why? Okay, let's ask the question. Okay, so I came up with a hypothesis. Okay, could it be the safety switch?
Yep.
Okay, but then I noticed the lights were off too. Okay, so I had to then refine my hypothesis. Okay, it's not just the safety switch, it's the lights as well.
Yep.
And if I'd gone out to the fuse box, I would have seen the safety switch was still on.
Yes.
Okay, so obviously there is a power cut to the house.
Yep.
Okay, could it be a fuse?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's unlikely because the fuses are for different circuits, so it wouldn't be the whole house.
Yes.
Electricity gone
Yes.
off. Okay, so refine the hypothesis again. Okay, it's a cut to the house.
Mm-hmm.
No electricity is coming to the house.
Yeah.
So what would be a reasonable hypothesis then?
Yes. That there's an issue with either our local power box, so it
Yeah.
might just be our street,
Yeah.
or it could be a broader, larger network issue.
Yep. Okay, that's reasonable to assume. But in this particular case, the way to test that hypothesis, okay, my experiment was to, ring the neighbours, have you got power?
Yes.
Okay. They said, yeah, we've got power.
So it was just you.
Just me. Okay, so I have to refine my hypothesis again. Okay, it's something that's affecting the electricity coming to my house.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a fuse, it's not a safety switch issue.
Yeah.
Okay, so at this point, I think, okay, well, this is beyond us.
Yes, I need to ring an expert.
I need to ring an expert. So I ring Energex and say, the power is off at our house.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the safety switch. It's not a fuse. Everybody else around me has power. So can you help us out? Well, as it turned out, it was a transformer had blown on the power pole outside our house.
Wow. Okay.
So they had to come out, get up the pole and fix it.
Yes.
Okay, so there is an example of just using the scientific method
Yes.
in real life.
Yeah.
Okay, ask the questions, come up with a hypothesis. Okay, the experiments in this case were, ringing up the neighbours to see if they had electricity.
Getting on Facebook. Who else hasn't got power?
Going out to the fuse box, and so on and so on.
Okay.
Okay,
All
so
right.
now that's just one example. Another example could be, you've got gastrointestinal issues going on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now say this very emphatically. If you have gastrointestinal issues going on, go to your doctor, see a gastroenterologist, make sure you get all your tests done.
Yep.
Because I know someone who had stage 4 bowel cancer.
Yep.
Because the doctor did not go through to those tests.
Right.
Okay, but I just make that comment. So, okay, you've gone through all the tests. They say, look, we can't find anything wrong. We've eliminated everything.
Yes.
Okay, we've eliminated gallstones and pancreatitis and colitis and XYZ.
Yes.
And their comment to you, well, play detective. Okay, think about what could be causing the problem. Okay, so then you'd probably go to a dietitian and you'd come up with a hypothesis. Okay, it could be FODMAPs causing this.
Yes.
Okay, so you then go and do a fair test where you eliminate, you go onto a low FODMAP diet and then you gradually introduce different ones to see which are the ones you're reacting to.
Yeah.
These sorts of
Keep
things.
a diary and...
Yep, keep a diary, all those sorts of things. Okay, record keeping.
Yes.
Okay, so that's really, it's good that people understand that in real life. Because as I say, people talking on social media about trusting their gut instincts, you can say, well, no, you can't trust gut instincts.
Yes.
It's got to be evidence-based science.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so what about logical fallacies?
Okay, so this is something that's quite important. Okay, you can tell I have a granddaughter.
Some baby toys.
Yes, some baby toys. Okay. Okay. What caused that ball to move from there to there?
A push force.
Yeah, a push force. Okay, so I applied a force that was sufficient to overcome the forces acting on it at rest.
Mm-hmm.
Things like friction against the table and so on.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. What caused that ball to move from there to there?
The push force.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so me pushing the ball.
Mm-hmm.
What did this have anything to do with it?
No, nothing.
Had absolutely nothing to do with it. Did
No.
it? It was a coincidence.
Yes.
Okay, it was a correlation that just happened to be there when I pushed it from there to there.
Yes.
But that did not cause me to push. That did not cause the ball to move from there to there.
No.
Okay. All right, this time. Okay, what caused the ball to move from there to there?
Well, you pushed the other ball, which hit this ball, which caused this ball to move.
Okay, so this ball basically
Yes.
applied a force and caused this ball to move
Yep.
from there to there.
Yep.
Okay, so I did this little simple experiment to illustrate a logical fallacy that I'm seeing a lot in social media at the moment, and that is correlation does not mean causation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it was me that caused that ball to move from there to there.
Mm-hmm.
When I put that ball there, it had absolutely nothing to do
Yes.
with that ball being moved from there to there.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. That's important to know. And then also, there was one time when correlation did mean causation.
Yes.
This ball in the picture did actually cause that ball to move from there to there.
Yes.
Okay, so correlation does not necessarily mean causation.
Okay.
Okay, now this is really, really important. Okay, it's important for everybody to understand this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, not just people who are going to go on in science. And the reason I say this, and this is probably going to sound controversial, but it is just science.
Yeah.
Okay, so in Australia at the moment, okay, in 2019, there was an average of 464 deaths per day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if we can use this bit of a silly illustration, but
Yeah.
okay, imagine that's a death of a person.
Right.
Okay,
Yep.
now this is 2019,
Mm-hmm.
death of a person.
Yes.
Okay, now those deaths are caused by all sorts of things. So the biggest killer in Australia is coronary heart disease.
Mm-hmm.
Then we've got dementia.
Yep.
Then we've got circulatory problems like strokes and aneurysms and those sorts of things. And then I think lung cancer comes in at number 4.
Okay, I was going to say cancer would have to be up there. Some
Yeah,
sort of
lung cancer.
Yeah.
There's also other things, accidents, suicides.
Yep.
Yeah, many things, you know, kidney disease.
Yep.
All sorts of things, other cancers obviously.
Yes.
Okay, so every day 464 people die,
Mm-hmm.
and they die of those things. And sadly they die at young ages unexpectedly.
Yes.
So I knew a girl at school in my year 9 class, so she would have been 14.
Mhm.
She lived near me, and she went to bed with a headache one night and didn't wake up.
Right.
And she had I think it was a burst aneurysm.
Yeah.
And I remember driving past her house on the way to school with the ambulances out there.
Yeah.
I also knew another man who was quite slim and appeared to be fit and healthy. He had a heart attack
Yep.
one night and died.
Mm.
Yeah, his wife called the ambulance, but didn't get there. Well, they got there, but they couldn't save him.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the reason I mention this is because, okay, 2019,
Mm-hmm.
464 people dying every day.
Yes.
Okay, let's fast forward now to 2021, this year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, this is happening. People are dying every day.
Yep. As they always do.
What do you think this correlation is here, which does not mean causation?
It's nothing.
It's nothing, okay? Well, I'm going to represent this as COVID vaccination,
Yep.
okay? If you go on the TGA website,
Yep.
the latest figures I checked, said that after vaccination, there have been 335 deaths,
Right.
okay? You know, following vaccination.
Yes.
In Australia.
So someone's had a vaccine and within a certain period of time they've died.
They've died.
Right.
Okay. Now, the TGA has looked at this and said, well, let me do the figures. 526 cases of these deaths happening.
Yep.
Where they have been vaccinated.
Yep.
The vaccines had absolutely nothing to do with the death.
Right.
And when you consider that in 2019, 464 people died every day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, with vaccination, we've been vaccinating since the end of February.
Yes.
Okay, you can see that the correlation of them having a vaccine really has nothing to do with them dying. So they've had a vaccination, but they've still died from their heart attack.
Yes.
They've still died from their terminal lung cancer.
Yes.
They've still died from their stroke or
Yes.
their aneurysm.
Yeah.
They've still been in a car accident. I'm not sure if those ones are reported on the site, but
Yes.
it's possible they are.
Yeah.
They've still had other things happen to cause death. But that's not been correlated with the vaccine. In fact, when they've done the figures, in terms of number of deaths per, million population, and compared that
Yes.
with the number of deaths per million in the unvaccinated population, there's no difference.
Right.
Okay? So having a COVID vaccine isn't going to stop you dying from lung cancer.
Right.
It's not going to stop you from having the heart attack you were going to have.
Yes.
It's not going to stop you from having a stroke.
Yeah.
Okay, but there's one important thing I do need to say. In that case, where
Yes.
the correlated thing did cause the reaction,
Yes.
there has been 9 cases of that happening.
Yes. In
Okay?
Australia.
In Australia.
Yep.
9 cases where people have died directly as a result of vaccination.
Yes.
And that's with the AstraZeneca vaccine.
Yep.
8 cases were TTS,
Yep.
and 1 case was ITP, so both rare blood clotting syndromes.
Right.
Okay, so I make that point because a lot of people say, oh, I'm not having a vaccine because 535 people have died after a vaccine.
Yes.
And what I'm saying is the correlation that someone had a vaccine had nothing to do with their death in 526
Yes.
of those cases.
Yep. I guess for me, the fact that the TGA put that number on their website, and if you're not from a scientific background, it instantly makes you, well, why are they putting that number on their website? They don't explain that fully. I think they just put on the number of deaths following the vaccine on the website.
Yeah.
We're not looking at anything other than, oh my goodness, there's, what did you say, 300 and whatever deaths there are following the vaccine.
Yeah.
So that's probably, one, it's a fault in my lack of education around that. But 2, I think also there has to be some onus on them to explain that a little better at times.
Yes. Well, they did actually put a sentence in there saying, we have examined these deaths carefully and found no correlation with the vaccine. But people don't understand that because they hold on to this, oh, well, that happened at the same time, therefore that caused that.
Yes.
I mean, my dad, for example, died of a heart attack at 62, which was reasonably young. There was a very strong genetic background to heart disease.
Yeah.
So that's something I have to be aware of. And he ate cornflakes that day.
Yeah, so did the cornflakes give him a heart attack?
You wouldn't say that the cornflakes gave him a heart attack.
True. Yes.
Okay. If he happened to have a COVID vaccine on that day, say it was this year, if he happened to have a COVID vaccine on that day, would you say the vaccine caused it? Of course you wouldn't.
Yes.
Okay. The autopsy showed that his arteries were blocked, and that's why he had the heart attack.
Okay.
So those sorts of things are important to be aware of.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Understanding that.
Yep. Okay.
And one of the factors in determining whether, for example, TTS was, as a result of the vaccine, is studying the incidence of that in the general population. Okay.
Right.
Could it be, for example, that those 9 deaths, however many per million, I think it's about 1 per million, or a bit more now, 1 point something million.
Mm-hmm.
Could it be that in the general population that happens? And they've said, well, no, that's actually occurring more than in the general population, the unvaccinated population.
Which is why they attribute to that it is a direct cause.
Yes, so they do attribute it as a direct cause.
Understand. Okay.
It's also the same with the other sort of thing that's going around, is that the vaccine causes infertility or causes miscarriage. Well,
Yes.
they've looked at the number of miscarriages per million of vaccinated population and compared that with the number of miscarriages per
Yes.
million unvaccinated population, and they find no difference.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Makes sense.
It's important.
Okay, and then let's cover the Dunning-Krueger Effect. Why is this one important for the kids and me, I guess, to understand? Do you think so?
Yeah. So far I've been talking about the principles of science, things like a fair test, the scientific method. I haven't really talked a lot about content. Now, that's not to say content is not important. Content is very, very important.
Yeah.
Okay. So psychologists have noticed this thing called the Dunning-Krueger Effect. Okay. I might need to do that up a bit closer.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now with this is the scale. This scale is confidence, so this is low confidence if you're down here, high confidence if you're up here.
Mm-hmm.
This scale is your actual knowledge about something.
Yeah.
Okay, so virtually no knowledge here, a little bit of knowledge here, quite a bit more knowledge here, and then if you're way up here, you're an expert.
Yeah.
Okay, you really understand your area. Okay, so this Dunning-Krueger effect here is where people who have very little knowledge about a subject, content of a subject,
Yeah.
and they don't understand scientific method or doing a fair test and these sorts of things, for some reason they have a lot of confidence that they know what they're talking about in a particular science area.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you find that as people learn a bit more and and receive education in science, they start to realise, wow, there's a lot of stuff I don't know.
Yes. I don't know what I don't know.
Okay. So I know myself, just studying biochemistry, and studying those processes, as you start to learn this, particularly metabolic biochemistry, as you start to learn this, you suddenly think, oh, whoa, there's an awful lot I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm not very confident in this.
Yeah.
Okay. Then as you learn more and more, we call this the slope of enlightenment. Okay. You gradually get more confident that you know what you're talking about. Okay. Until when you've studied a lot, done a lot of study, you become an expert.
Yeah.
And then you start to gain your confidence back. Okay. So, not to be insulting, but they call this one here the peak of Mount Stupid. Okay. So it's when people have a little bit of knowledge, but they think they know everything.
Yes.
Okay. They're very confident in their assertions. Now, I'm seeing this on social media a lot, okay, and in particular areas, okay, so when it comes to electrical engineering, for example, I'm probably about here somewhere, okay. I know a bit more than the average person because I've tutored my son in physics, but my son-in-law, who's an electrical engineer, he's more up here somewhere, and so when I don't understand something, I go and ask him.
Yeah.
Okay, and I trust his judgment on it because he's the expert on it. Okay, he didn't study all those years at university for nothing.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like ringing the plumber for a blocked toilet or whatever.
If I want to know about the health of the Great Barrier Reef, I talk to my friend who is a marine biologist.
Yeah.
And he can tell me a lot of information because he knows a lot more. He's up around here somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, so what I'm saying here is it's important to know content, but the right content as well. Okay?
Yeah.
So it's the content with those scientific principles applied. Okay? Being able to look at a journal article, for example, when it's published is peer-reviewed. Well, you would be looking to trust peer-reviewed articles,
yes,
not journals that are not peer-reviewed.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's the important content to be looking at, as against trusting in YouTube or BitChute videos.
Yes.
Or even some news stories. Okay?
Yeah.
They're likely to contain information from people who are way down here somewhere. Okay, a lot of confidence but not much knowledge.
Yes.
So it's very important when you want to understand a topic that you seek the experts in peer-reviewed science.
Right.
Okay, or I mean, obviously, if people are down here and really, don't know very much about a subject, or here and don't know much about a subject,
Yep.
then ask people who do know. Ask experts.
Yes.
Okay, don't Google, YouTube and BitChute videos.
Yep.
Okay, or news stories. And if you want to learn more, then obviously study that content, but content from people who know what they're talking about.
Yes. Yeah, that all definitely makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, that was...
So that's just a few of the...
Yes, that was a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, good a lot, but yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot to take in. I might keep this myself and hang it on the wall and share that with the kids, because that's actually a really good one. So Dunning-Krueger is a scientist?
I think they're psychologists.
They're psychologists.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so they've come up with this.
I'd have to go and look it up to be sure, but I think it was people in psychology who observed this Dunning-Krueger effect.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's good. Thank you. So, is there anything else on top of that you want to add in? I think we've covered in the first video and this video. Whew, I think we've covered a lot. So
basically, I want to say science is important.
Yes.
Particular aspects of science are very, very important.
And it really, I guess, from spending the last hour and then close to nearly this hour with you and our other conversations, it's made me realise that science is one of those things. Whilst we can do a lot of incidental learning with science, and that's just as valuable, it's probably not something that we should be leaving up to chance and just doing things when things arise.
Yes. Yeah.
That we should be taking some kind of proactive approach with science with our children.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. No, that was good. That was valuable. All right, so I hope that you got as much out of it as what I did. Even if you didn't, I certainly got a lot out of the last 2 videos. I'm not sure whether we will do any more, but if you have anything else that you want to add, please pop it down in the description box below. Please give us a thumbs up like for today's video. Lesley's put a lot of time and effort into coming along and preparing for these 2 videos. So thank you again. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And I hope it's been valuable. So thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Until next time. Bye for now.